For over 2 decades, Counter-Strike has offered an elite competitive experience, one shaped by millions of players from across the globe. And now, the next chapter in the CS story is about to begin. This is Counter-Strike 2.
CS2 is bad. Get it right out of the way. Everyone knows it. CS2 is not a good game. It's a downgrade in basically every way that CSGO was. It removed more features and content than it added, and even those who enjoy CS2 will admit that it isn't good. I haven't talked to a single person who would rather play CS2 than CSGO, and it failed to achieve the one thing that Valve wanted it to be a modernised new version of CSGO. The original idea for this video was going to be the positives and the negatives of CS2. I was going to analyse both, talk about what's good and what's bad. But there really isn't enough good to make a video out of that, so we're only going with the bad. I know loads of people are going to say CS2 is already dead, it already killed the franchise. That's just not true. You can look at the player count. Even though a lot of people don't like the game, it's doing well, but I don't think it will stay like this. I think the players will drop off. I think people will stop caring if they don't fix the main issues. So I'm going to break this video down into 5 points. Each one is going to be a main issue of CS2 that I think needs to be fixed before the game can actually be good. And even when they fix all of these, that doesn't mean the game is going to be as good as CSGO. It just means it's going to be a decent game. 1 is bugs and glitches, 2 is gunplay, 3 is content, 4 is skins, and 5 is the lack of support. I'm going to have the timestamps on screen for each one of these. If you want to skip to a certain part, you can go ahead and do that. Things like bugs and glitches, I have a lot less to say about, and I'm not going to sit here and talk about tick rate and all the technical. I don't care about that, and I'm not experienced, and I'm not educated enough to tell you about that. I have over 1,000 hours in CS. I think I'm qualified enough to say this. So my opinions will probably differ to a lot of yours, to more experienced players than me. I know a lot of you know live CS. But with that said, let's go on to my first point. This will probably be the shortest segment, bugs and glitches.
You guys see this?
It's not uncommon for new releases to have countless issues. Most people see it as normal, and even AAA like $70 games release with game-breaking issues. The problem with CS2 is it's not a new game. It doesn't have that excuse or the lenience that we give new releases. It's basically just a glorified graphical update for another 10-year-old game. If you go on the website, the things they're boasting about with CS2 are the map updates, which most of them are just graphical, the smoke updates, which yeah, they're nice, but it's not exactly something to brag about. Most games would do this and they wouldn't include it in their trailers and one of the headlines on their website. It just shows that CS2 had a lack of new features. They tried reinventing old ones, breaking most of them in the process. There's no excuse for the situation that CS2 released in and is still currently in, especially with the amount of time it's been since the last game. CSGO was in 2012. It's been 12 years. CS2 now is in a worse state than CSGO is. I'm not going to list all the bugs, that'll take hours, there's way too many to go through, but I'll leave the CS2 update blog in the description. You can go and check that out if you want to see every single update that they've done since release. I will show a few of them. There's a great video by someone called Sniff that I found. It's about 10 months old, but it really shows just how game-breaking a lot of these issues were, in case you're unaware of it. So I'm going to play some segments of his video. All credit goes to him, and I'll leave his channel link in the description.
Until this happened. But Rikuda discovered a method that worked a bit more consistently and pretty much mastered it to perfection.
I figured it out.
Map's walls. But you had to be careful because you could easily fall out of the map. Moving on to one of my favorite exploits, which allowed you to practically use any cheap protected command in your competitive games, with only a few exceptions like no clip. But you could still use commands to either play in the third person or give yourself bird's eye view to the point you could see enemies on the other side of the map. Next, we obviously got the Michael Jackson peak. Now this bug initially just occurred with analog keyboards
And I think that kind of says enough about the quality of CS2 on release. How some of these bugs go through quality control, I don't know, but this isn't the level you'd expect even from an indie dev. CS2's gameplay is very basic, it's very standard, it's a timeless formula, which means that it has to be polished to perfection. So a lot of games can try and replicate it, games like Valorant.
For every kill you get, I'll give you an ooh.
Alright, bet.
So for CS to continue being the market leader, it needs to be polished, it needs to be competitive. The competitive scene is what keeps the game alive. There's very few casual CS players, and if you play unranked then you're probably just a cheater. They have been keeping up with the bugs and fixing them when necessary, and I'm sure people will continue to discover more, and more will come with more updates. That's if they update the game. A game like Deadlock, which is in early access now, with a fraction of the player count of CS2, get consistent updates compared to CS2. Whenever there's a bug, they fix it. Whenever there's an issue, they fix it, which shows that they're capable of fixing these issues and addressing them when they need to, but they just don't. But I think there's a misconception that Counter-Strike will never die, which really isn't true. The game is held together by its pro scene, and all these bugs and glitches, and having these kind of issues can really ruin that competitive experience. Yeah, the game is fine at the moment because we've got lots of current pro players, but if you got to think 10, 20 years in the future, esports players don't last that long. They usually retire quite early, either due to them losing their skill at the game, or they just retire because they've made enough money. And if the game isn't in a good position for new pro players to start out, think about in 10 years, think about in 20 years, are we going to have a new influx of pro players? Or people who are trying to become esports players? No, probably not. If the game isn't fair and isn't competitive, people aren't going to try and get into the competitive scene. If there's no pro players, there's no esports events. And we all know Valve isn't going to fund and host any of these events, so it's really down to the community. I do have more to say, but I don't want to make this video too long, so moving on. The gunplay is a weird one to me. Sometimes it feels fine, just like CSGO. Other times it feels like I'm playing a completely different game. You can call it a skill issue, but I'm sure loads of you've experienced. You shoot somebody directly in the head and you end up hitting the body, or you just don't hit them at all. And obviously this is a massive issue for CS. The entire game is massively inconsistent. To me, it's not even a bad thing if they would have changed the gunplay, because when it worked, even though it's not as good, at least it's consistent and you kind of know what you're doing. But the fact that whenever I load up CS and play a game, it doesn't feel like I'm improving, because every time I shoot my gun, I've been reset back to 0. And like I said in the beginning, I don't really understand the kind of technical side, so I'm just going to go over tick rate really quick. I'm sure if you just go into the comments, or you can just Google it, some nerd will be explaining it on Reddit. But by my understanding, tick rate is the number of times server updates. So if you have a tick rate of 64, every 64th of a second, the server is going to update the game data. So if you shoot your gun, the next 64th of a second, the game will update and realize that you've shot your gun. And CSGO had a 64 tick rate, which when CSGO released in 2012, that was fine, that was normal. When it was getting to the end of its life, you had games like Valorant that were out with a standard 128 tick rate. In the CS2 trailer, they showed off the sub tick rate system, which was just meant to reduce that time between the ticks, and people were excited. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. There were reactions to the trailers, which looked like this.
Updates. Rate no longer matters for moving and shooting, so the
And I think expectations were set too high. In a game like CS, nobody wants to admit they're bad, so it's very easy to blame the game when you die or when you lose. It was good in concept, and Valve is known for innovating, but it just didn't work out, and they never even tried to fix it. That's it for Gunplay really. The biggest issue I have with CS2 is the removal of content. I can excuse not adding masses and masses of new content, but removing existing content, to me, unforgivable and lazy. Danger Zone was an attempt at a battle royale mode for Counter-Strike, and people had mixed feelings about it, but I was always a Danger Zone enjoyer, and loads of my friends were too. It was a good break from the normal game and competitive. I'm guessing it's just the size of the map. It'd probably be quite hard to remake that in the CS2 engine, and it would be demanding on a lot of computers, but it really just shows how lazy Valve are. They already do nothing for their games. They just couldn't be bothered to release this mode because it would be too much work. We lost out on a lot of the casual fun game modes in CS2. They removed Demolition, Flying Scoutsman, retakes. We're missing achievements as well. I think there was like 200 achievements in CSGO to get. We're missing tons of maps, loads and loads of maps, and yeah, they're slowly adding them back, but it's very, very slowly. They've really taken the personality out of the game. It's way too standard now. The only thing you can really do is play competitive, because just unranked is just cheater hell. They've removed all the fun and unique modes that made CSGO so popular, so fun. Most people treat CS like a gambling simulator, I know I do. People care more about the skins than the actual game, and I think that's become more true with CS2's release, as the gameplay just isn't that enjoyable anymore. And CS2 had a lot of changes to skins and how they look, the new lighting and the new models, and some of them weren't for the better. When the game released, there were a lot of skins that just looked bad. Most of them to date have been fixed. That's a well done to Valve for that one. Dopplers, fades, and a lot of the bright, shiny looking skins, they're a lot more colourful. They benefit from the CS2's lighting. Case hardens, I know they did fix those, but I still don't like how they look. But aside from the looks of skins, personally I'm worried about the direction that Valve is going. With the introduction of case renting and the armory pass, it's clear that Valve is trying to move away from the case and key system. I'm a gambling addict, I love the way that CS does it, I love loot boxes, I love stuff like that, and I've probably spent way too much money on it, so this is going to be biased. I know CoffeeZilla made that video where he just cried to his impressionable audience over online gambling. I made a video about it, if you want to watch it I'll leave the link in the description. And I hope there isn't like a big push to remove loot boxes and gambling, because I know most people love the way that Valve does it. I think just because some people can't control themselves when it comes to loot boxes, and they spend way too much, doesn't mean it has to be ruined for everyone. And I think that's the view that a lot of people have, including CoffeeZilla, because a few people are addicted. But it's a great system and it lets everybody get skins, cheap skins, but yeah, Valve is trying to move away from it. They've already had to make exceptions, like with the France X-ray system, which is basically just still opening a loot box, but it does look a bit different. And they're trying to monetize CS in other ways, like with the deagle heat treated, where you're like guaranteed to get the deagle. Obviously the pattern is random, but you're guaranteed a deagle for 50 armory stars. Some people might like that. For me, that's infinitely worse than a case. You're paying $5 for one deagle skin, and it's a really bad. But I'm worried if the armory pass and the renting system is financially successful, then they're gonna lean into it more. Maybe we'll see knives in the armory pass, stuff like that, and that'll just devalue all of the skins.
Low tip of fade, low tip of fade, low tip of eye.
I'm going to wrap up this video by talking about the lack of support. It's no secret, Valve are lazy, they leave their games to die. Just look at TF2. Since CS2's release, it's been neglected like my son. It barely gets any updates, and even when it does, it's all the community made stuff. Valve doesn't do anything for the game, and this is the main thing that's killing Counter-Strike. CS2 is giving the impression that Valve doesn't care. I agree. Imagine your first CS game is CS2. That's going to give a terrible impression. There's not going to be any new audience, and honestly, Valve deserves it. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it all the way to the end, I want to thank you so much. If you leave a comment saying you made it right to the end, I'll make sure to give it a heart. And I've made a Discord server, so if you want to join it, I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but first couple of people who join, I'll give them mod because I don't have many viewers. So thank you guys, love you.